Hello, my name is Richard Rieser, and I'm a teacher, a disabled person, a disability activist, and an equality trainer, and I coordinate UK Disability History Month. I'm going to talk to you today about valuing differences and understanding the need for disability equality for young disabled people. Impairment is when part of your body or your mind doesn't work or does not work like most people's. There are many types of impairment, but they are all long-term and impact on how we do ordinary things. With adjustments, many disabled people can do things differently and are not that affected by their impairments. But there are always attitudinal barriers towards people with impairments. The main sorts of impairments are to do with physicality, doing bodily things, walking, lifting, breathing, and hidden things to do with the body. There are difficulties, those who have difficulties seeing, problems with spotting hazards, communication, hearing difficulties, communicating, those who are deaf-blind or deaf, hard of hearing. And then there are those with thinking difficulties. That can be neurodiversity, or it can be general learning difficulty or specific learning difficulty. But in each way, people have difficulties doing things in the way they're normally presented. Then there are also things about the state of your mind, the mental health conditions, feeling anxious, upset, sad, depressed. And these are the main types of impairment. The causes of impairment, there have been impairments as long as there have been human beings. And the main causes are things like accidents, war, disease, disasters of various sorts, your genes, poverty, hunger, and just the stress of living. For thousands of years, people who are different have been viewed as either gods, bad, burdens, funny, or freaks, and often treated badly. For instance, the ancient Egyptians had a god called Bez, who was a short person. The Vikings were led by Ivar the Boneless, who was a disabled warrior. Richard III was much maligned because the Tudors had usurped the throne from him, and so Shakespeare wrote a play where he had many impairments. In fact, when we found his skeleton a few years ago, he did have scoliosis, or humpback, but he didn't have a withered arm or a lame leg, which the Shakespeare play said he had. The Blind Witch in Hansel and Gretel is a good example of folk tales which are written down as children's stories. She's visually impaired, uses a crutch, she can't see very well. She know that by Hansel's finger and a stick being mixed up. Or else the beggars. Up until the Reformation, many disabled people were looked after by monasteries and nuns. But once the Reformation started, they were out on the streets, tramping, begging, and the first Elizabeth and Poor laws were brought in. And then these were to help people mainly, but then later disabled beggars got locked in the workhouse, often for the whole of their lives. We're often seen as a burden, and that was never more so than in the Nazi Third Reich, where disabled people, not just those with mental health issues, but physical, sensory, people with cerebral palsy or extreme autism, as well as blind and deaf, were sent to camps with a black triangle inverted, which we've reclaimed in Disability History Month, and then murdered. And it's estimated 250,000 people in Germany that happened to. Despite all of these barriers and negative feelings, disabled people have always been achieving. Not all, but many. Albert Einstein, for instance, the scientist, had dyslexia and autism. The artist Frida Kahlo, polio, but also a problem with her back from an injury. Rose Ayling-Ellis, who won Strictly last year, was also an actor on EastEnders, but is profoundly deaf. Steve Wonder, who is a blind pop singer and a UN ambassador, or Sarah Gowdy, who's a TV actor with Down syndrome, who's appeared in a number of recent TV series. Whatever our impairments, they're not really the problem. The problem is the barriers, the things we can't do because of the way they're designed or the way people think they should be done. So the way people think, their attitudes about us, these are a major barrier. The way things are built or designed in the environment, these are a barrier. The way things are done, rules, laws, practices, organization present barriers. People with different impairments face different barriers. Often they're similar and some are different depending on their type of impairment, but all barriers are disabling. Impairments cannot be get rid of, but barriers can. So let's have a look at some. For instance, the barriers that someone who uses a wheelchair might face are steps, curbstones, narrow doorways, and the solutions are fairly simple. A ramp hasn't got to be too steep or too long, dropped curbs, or an improved width of a doorway. Barriers for people who are visually impaired or blind, text, getting across the road are two main ones, but obstacles on the pavement. How can these be dealt with? Well, the 200-year-old Braille alphabet helps some blind people. Modern technology helps a lot of people. Pelican crossings where you can hear that it's safe to cross. The C-pen, other speech to text mechanisms are all very helpful here. And for people with hearing impairment or deafness, using a phone is not possible. Often people shout at people thinking if they shout they'll hear, and they don't. Screens without subtitling. So some of the solutions might be signing on a smartphone, finger spelling and signing, captioning on all screens, subtitling on television programs. Barriers for people who are neurodiverse, who have learning difficulties, large amounts of text, too many signs coming in from the environment, overloading people's perceptions. For the text, we can have easy read with pictograms. For the complex overload of sensory input, we can have ways of breaking that down. We can have information provided simply in things like a visual timetable. For people with mental health issues, there's a general lack of support, and there's a lack of friendship, being overwhelmed by the circumstances of their living. We can develop solutions where we're more supportive of people, we listen to people more, we provide adjustments so that when things are too difficult, they can stop and withdraw. We can have therapeutic or medical interventions and understanding, such as drug therapy. Mental health issues are a big issue, particularly for young people. Did you know 1 in 5 children of the ages 13 to 18 have mental illness? The main forms are anxiety and depression. 30% of depressed teens are being treated, but 70% are not. Mental illness can affect physical health, employment, education, and relationships. So we have moved over the period till recently from seeing the problem in the person, that they're not fitting in, that they're not doing things in the right way, so we've got to try and fix them, to moving to say, hang on, there's nothing wrong with us, we're just different. What we need is solutions to the barriers that the disabling world has created for us. So we need to move from disabled people being viewed as people to be pitied, treated badly, having things done to them, to viewing disabled people as human beings with the same rights as others, and the barriers need to be got rid of. This is well shown in this film from Ndaka, which Disability History Month also helped with. And it tells us about the social model.
According to the medical model of disability, the word disabled means less able. Less able to achieve your potential, less able to have meaningful relationships, less able to play an active part in the world around you, and that this is just your bad luck. This outdated view of the world puts the responsibility of overcoming disabling barriers on the person with an impairment. This idea is changing. The more modern social model of disability says that a person doesn't have a disability, that they are disabled. They're disabled by society. It is the attitudes and physical barriers imposed on them by society that prevents them from achieving their potential. The social model was developed by disabled people and their allies to help them take action against discrimination, to empower people to find solutions, remove barriers, and campaign together for equality and human rights. They showed how people with lots of different impairments face many of the same problems. These disabling barriers include prejudiced opinions and attitudes, restricted access, people being systematically excluded. The social model looks for the ways that society can be planned and organised in order to provide accessibility, independence, and opportunity in a way that enables people rather than disables them. What we learn from the social model of disability is that disability is a social construct created by social barriers, barriers which can be eliminated.
So every human being, if we take this social model approach, has human rights, including all disabled people, many of whom don't get their rights. That's why, after many years of campaigning by disabled people's movement, in 2001 to 2006, the UN set about constructing a convention or declaration on the rights of persons with disabilities, and this was passed in 2006. Our government in the UK agreed this in 2009 to make sure disabled people living in the UK, children, young people, adults, all get rights in the convention and they get access to those rights. The government hasn't signed up to that in English law, but it has introduced the Equality Act, which covers many of the same things, and access to take individual complaints to the UN body when we've exhausted all procedures in the UK. The Equality Act provides specific protection for disabled people from discrimination, hate crime, bullying, and gives disabled people a right to reasonable adjustments. We can look at how this impacts on our lives through a film made in Scotland by the Equality and Human Rights Commission.
Are you a disabled person? Disabled people found from advocates for human rights convention of the law. United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was written by advocates for disabled people. It is for people with non-dear physical, mental, intellectual, and sensory impairments, guaranteed its barriers to inclusion in society. It was signed by the UK government in 2007 by 2009. This makes the government, including the Scottish government, and state election join the human rights. Based on the Human Rights Act, all the community and disability prevention. Different steps you can take to intervention. You can shape decisions, ask questions, share experiences, challenge barriers, and influence change. The disability convention sets out the rights, such as the right to choose your own state for independent living, the right to work, the right to equal access and participation in education, the right to be free from violence and harassment, the right to make independent decisions and be of ceremony, the right to take part in and have the same access to sport, culture, and leisure activities, the right to decide to live, who to be in a relationship with, who to live with, to information, side. It's third convention, third license.
So what do those articles look like? Well, apart from the general preambles you get on all treaties, there's the right for disabled people to be treated equally in all aspects of life. Equal rights, particularly for women and children who are disabled, because there are extra oppressions that are coming in there. Awareness in the community of disabled people's rights and everybody's rights under this convention. Access, not just to buildings, but to information, to the internet, to objects for sale. Everything needs to be accessible. The right to life is a fairly fundamental one. Safety in emergencies, particularly increasing with climate emergencies, but also natural disasters, floods, and so on. We need to have special arrangements for disabled people to make sure that they're included in evacuations and their needs are taken. Equality in the law, equal justice in the courts. To have your views taken seriously and for people to help you form your views, to be free and safe, not to be tortured or treated cruelly, protection from violence and abuse, respected as people in our own rights, be able to move around areas across countries, to live independently in the community. That doesn't mean doing everything for ourselves, but it means having control over what happens to us and where it's done. Help and support in mobility and other ways of adjusting with technology to the barriers. Freedom of speech and the right to information, privacy, the right to family life and relationships, the right to education, which is increasingly seen as the right to an inclusive education at all levels, equal health services, rehabilitation services, access to them, the right to work and to training to prepare for work. And that should be in the open market, not just in shelter. It shouldn't be in sheltered workshops. Equal quality of food, housing and water, wherever you are in an institution, a hospital, or in your home. Being part of the political life, taking part in elections, running for elections, getting the information so you can make up your mind about that, being involved in sports, arts and leisures. These are some of the main articles. Now, we're going to be coming into Ickberg School and working with 3 groups. And on the first session, we're going to be looking at what are long-term impairments and what are not, such as obviously things like flu and measles are not, but something like dyslexia or autism or general learning difficulty, the impact of Down syndrome. These things will have a long-term impairment. Match those different impairments with the barriers people face with various cards that young people will be able to match up and discuss with each other. And then once they've found the barriers, there'll be cards with solutions on that they can find. And then we'll have a discussion about seeing the world through a social model approach, which is the barriers that disable, not our impairments. Then there'll be a second session using a local map, going out into the local area and mapping the barriers we find for disabled people, not just wheelchair users, blind people, deaf people, people with learning difficulty in the local area. We'll record those with symbols on the map and then discuss what we've learned from that. The third session, we'll be finding out about disability rights, maybe look at the Scottish film, Slowed Down and Broken Down. We will look at examples of different rights and some case studies, not all 30 of them, but a few selected ones. And then what you should do when you think your rights have been breached, either out in the street from the follow-up to the maps or in your own life experience, and they should maybe write some short letters to MP or local councillor and then discuss, you know, how the rights-based approach impacts on your life as a disabled person. This could lead on to people at ICBERG, other schools and colleges across the country taking part in Exploration 2023, which is part of UK Disability History Month theme, which is young people and youth this year and children. And that's important, that history now and in the past and where we're going in the future is looked at. To help us with that, we're going to explore how young disabled people identify what works well for them, what works badly for them, and their suggested improvements. This can be for 4 age groups, up to 8, 8 to 12, 12 to 16, post 16, and individual or group entries in any format. So a poster, a play, a drama, a piece of written spoken word, a piece of writing, a picture, a drama role play. All of these things could be submitted up until the end of October. We will need a signature from a guardian or carer for those who submit, because the work will be shared on the internet and possibly on programs as well. The panel will be led by Michael Rosen. Teachers, disabled people will be looking for the most innovative ideas and ways of expressing those in each category. And they'll be shared at the launch. The whole purpose of this presentation, the work we're doing and what we're doing in Disability History Month this year, is to make young disabled people and their non-disabled peers more aware of a social model, rights-based approach rather than the old traditional medical negative approach to disability. So it's all about valuing difference, and I thank you for your time.